Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Data Sense podcast. This is a show where you learn from technical and business leaders how to connect business and data to develop your own ability or sense to use data to move your business forward. Today, we have Andrew Donald. Andrew is the head of engineering at Optima Partners. He brings 20 years of experience in the IT industry and 10 years in cloud. For most of his experience, he has worked in consultancy. In the main, his consultancy work has been with large financial organizations. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Hi, Zane. Hello. Thank you for having me here. It's good to be here. Yeah.
So, 20 years in the IT industry and 20 years, I believe Intel Pentium came out 20 years ago, and we have now some very, very powerful computers. How do
Yeah.
you feel? How quickly has 20 years changed?
Oof, Frankie. See, I actually, it's very flattering of you to refer to me as coming from the Intel Pentium age. I'm actually from before it. My first machine was a 486DX266, one architecture before Pentium. Yes, so that's been quite a while in the field. Yeah, it's come on leaps and bounds, incredibly so. When I was starting out my career, everything was about, can we afford to buy a bigger server? And where are we going to put this server when we buy it? And are we going to spend like £50,000 on a server, and we're going to put it in a server rack in a small designated area in our office? And then, gradually over time, we started veering away from that more towards co-location was the term they used to use, trying to protect your assets off-site in big warehouse structures. And now everything seems to be going very much towards the cloud, or at least that's the way I tend to experience things. I'm sure a lot of people are at varying places along that journey, but certainly a lot of the clients we engage with as a business is they're in the cloud space, and
Yeah.
I think that's a benefit. It's a good place to be. I think a lot of the problems of the past have been dispensed with, but it's still good to know about them, right? So,
Yeah. What's really interesting, I saw this thing where AWS is offering these big machines that look like old CPUs, but bigger with an AWS logo on it. And what they're saying is this is your local cloud. So it's quite interesting that they are offering that as a service that, oh, for heavy usage, we have really powerful machines in this, and this is your local cloud. So I wonder whether this will take off. It doesn't seem like it because this is like, for now, cloud seems to be where it's at, but it's a funny one where I saw some, basically big CPUs is like almost like, oh, you're going back to your local cloud.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I'm quite fond of following like retro tech on YouTube and things like that. So I was watching a channel at the weekend where a guy was talking about phonographs and phonograph tubes. And so, at the turn of the century, they used to have like music that was printed on a tube, and the tube would turn round and it would detect the music from imprints in that tube. And everyone was laughing about, oh, how this technology is really, really old, and people don't even know it existed. And you have to wonder to yourself, is compact disc going to be like that at some point soon? It's like, how long is it before the current generations that are coming into working in the business wouldn't ever need to use a disc for anything? Yeah, they wouldn't even ever need to have a compact disc or a DVD, or it's because all the tech they need is cloud located. So it's in
Yeah.
one form or another, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
that
it's
that that is true. Now, with obviously you must have seen a lot of challenges with the migrating to cloud and digital transformation, especially for financial sector. What would you say was your biggest challenge that you faced, technically or non-technically?
yeah. I think it's a combination with financial services. I think it's a combination of both. I mean, governance is a big thing in financial services, I think. So there's a lot of, particularly from old financial services organizations that have a well formulated and very strong governance framework. There's a balance to be had between being pragmatic but then also being secure. And I think sometimes financial services organizations lean so heavily on secure that pragmatism and innovation can be sometimes stifled in the mix. And I think the professional place to be in all of that is to be trying to innovate around the governance framework. And yeah, I worked on a large project with a high street bank that involved auditing, effectively enabling an audit workforce team to go out into branches and determine that the right materials were placed in branches. So financial services compensation scheme notices, all of the different literature that should be there for terms and conditions on your mortgage and things like that. And inside of that solution that we built up, every single thing that was taken as a piece of data was something you could see when you would wander into the branch. So, you know, all information inherent within the system was public. But I can still tell you in that project, we had lots and lots of challenges around governance because it was like, is this secure enough? This needs to be really, really tight, really well controlled. And we would keep saying, well, why? Why does it need to be? So, I mean, if you can wander into a branch and pick up a leaflet and the system's containing a picture of that leaflet, surely there's no sensitive information there, right? That's just public. And it's like that's a strange position to be in, I think, because you can see the default design of a bank or a financial services organization would be secure everything. It must be secure. It's like, but in this particular case, that wasn't a criteria, right? So, but yeah, a very unusual one. I can say mostly it's a different space than that. But yeah, I think governance is the tricky one, I think.
How do you navigate, like, say if it's governance, or it's tricky because it's not exactly a technical problem, but it's like a blocker for technical innovation. So would you say that's more like, how do you educate or bring people to say, actually, we should be doing this, this is better, or
Yeah. I think, I mean, in a lot of situations, it's about very tight control of data, really. You know, one of the principles that we operate to, which I heard succinctly put the other day, which I was quite impressed with, it wasn't anything that came from me, it was one of my colleagues said it, which I was impressed with, was always handle the lowest sensitivity of data you can possibly get. So it's like, which is quite a good piece of advice. So it's like, if somebody comes to you and says, here's all the details about me and some other stuff I need you to work with. It's like, no, hang on a minute. I don't want all your personal details. I want to work with building out a capability or a model or a framework around the stuff that is desensitized, right? So that you're not jeopardizing anybody's kind of data in any way. I think that's quite a professional kind of stake to be in, really. So yeah, I mean, control of data is important. I think abstraction of data is sometimes important as well. So, I think we could all attest to the fact that we don't want our bank account number and sort codes, sent out around the world, right? But if I could turn your bank account number and sort code into a checksum, well, the checksum's not really worth anything to anybody, right? You can't take the checksum and turn it back into the account number and sort code, but the checksum will still uniquely identify me, Andrew, as that account number and sort code to anyone who owns the account number and sort code, right? So there's ways of kind of abstracting the data, anonymizing the data, but still maintaining its uniqueness. I think that's a really important thing. And I think people get very, very, what's the word? Possibly kind of like ingrained into them that, any identification of an individual is like the most serious thing in the world ever. I can remember having a fierce debate with some of my colleagues in the past about is a postcode PII. And to someone who's a purist, they'll go, postcode's PII. And I would say, well, if I give you a friend of mine's postcode who you don't know, can you come and tell me who that person is?
Hmm.
And then suddenly everyone's like, well, no, not really. So how is it personally identifying an individual? It's not really, it's at best it's a street, 30, 50, 100. If it's a street in London, it could be 5,000 people living in it, maybe, it's like, but yeah. So I think, a good narrative and a good control and understanding about what represents good control of data versus what represents obsessive control and unnecessary regulation of data is the balance point, I think. Yeah. Like a part of my work sometimes overlaps with the health space, and I wouldn't say that I'm strong in the health space, although I'm aspiring to be so in the future. I have colleagues that work in this space, and they're excellent in that territory. But I think one of the things that kind of frustrates me a bit about data and data security is the kind of notion of, and particularly in health records, is, you know, the privacy and security of the individual is protected. But sometimes you don't want privacy to be the only thing that's important. So if I mean, I'll give you the example and let people decide, but my opinion is that if I was suffering from an illness that was a very unusual illness, and if I was to let my medical records be published to a collection of people who could identify from my medical records what was wrong with me, and in conjunction with other people who had also volunteered their medical records, I think I would be much more happy to know that I had been given an additional chance and additional capability to make
Yeah.
my life longer as a result of having divulged my data than as a result of the default for it being entirely secure for me. I think,
Yeah.
there's a lot of questions, I suppose, in our future around the morality of what represents good data control, right? So it's like, if you could have extended your life by a further 5 to 10 years through medical innovation because you had made your records public, wouldn't you choose that? It's like, I,
Mm.
I know I would. It's like, yeah.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's quite interesting because obviously by default right now it's all about GDPR, no PII data, and rightly so because obviously there have been a lot of data breaches. I
Yeah.
recently read that there are just so many data breaches. It's unbelievable. So many companies being targeted. So yeah, that is quite interesting. But yeah, definitely well, one thing is data should be secure, but the second thing is that if it can be used in the right way, then it should be, and that securing the data should not get in the way of innovation.
Yes, yes. I think we all, as a kind of human right, have that kind of the right to anonymity, and we should have the right to protect our own data. But we should also have the right where we desire to make things known and to share. Yeah, I mean,
Mm,
you look at the cloud space at the moment, and you look at all of the innovations, particularly in AI, that are coming along at the moment. So, I think going back to your question at the beginning about all the things that have changed. At the beginning of my career, it was about getting data. It was about being able to acquire it from somewhere, which was almost an impossible task. And
mm,
in today's age, we're drowning in so much of it, we don't know what to do with it. It's like the problem is being able to find meaning in the noise. It's like, which is a much more difficult problem, I think. Yeah,
mm.
yeah,
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Talking about data and AI and stuff. What's interesting is that ChatGPT is trained on as much public data as possible, but there are implications of whether those companies will now allow that data to be used for further training. And what does it mean now? Because obviously there is open source data, there's data that can be used for anything, but will companies still allow that? And what does the world look like once you have more ChatGPT users and ChatGPT APIs embedded into so many different applications, and then everyone sees, oh yeah, it's trained on this data. We need to make sure that we secure that we don't share. So do you feel that internet is likely to experience like a closed paywall system
oh,
for different data sources? Like Twitter did this something recently. Elon Musk basically put a massive paywall where if you want to use Twitter data, you have to pay like 42,000 pounds or dollars, sorry, per year just for the license of using that data. So that's
yeah.
quite interesting. What do you think?
A lot of the internet, a lot of the culture of the internet from the early days is very strongly balanced on free, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's like, and I think that companies tread this very fine line, don't they, where they have to provide enough free capability for a user base to become interested in their platform. I think that, then instigating a paywall after that is probably not the best behavior in the world. But I suppose if it's a choice of an organization collapsing or having to instigate some kind of payment channels, you'd hope that they'd find responsible ways to instigate those payment channels, I suppose, to keep the companies moving. But I mean, it's human nature, isn't it, to look for a more competitive deal in things, isn't it? Or at least that's the kind of like a recent thought in design of society that makes things good, is that the more competitive we are, the more the market is held to account. So you have to be careful, I suppose, if you're going to instigate a big paywall, that you don't have a competitor that does nothing remotely close to the same, because you know people can be fickle, right? They can just move their entire allegiance from one social media platform to another, and the one that was the most popular can easily become the least popular and work its way out of circulation. So when you yeah it's interesting to see how market share can be very fickle. I mean, the good example of this, maybe not so much in the data space per se, but in telecommunications, I was having a chat with a friend of mine the other day about how much telecommunications has changed in the last 20 to 30 years. And a big part of that, if like back in the day when mobile phones were there was lots of diversity in mobile phones, right? So you had flip phones and click phones and aerials extending out of things, and phones that were becoming smaller, so they were the size of a matchbox, and then phones that were bigger and so forth. So my lasting memory of that time was that Nokia had an absolute master share of the market, But then of course the smartphone comes along, competition probably for the vendors that manufacture handsets is probably diminishing, right? If you think about what a smartphone looks like these days, there's not one smartphone is a lot like another smartphone, right? There's not that much kind of innovation of design. So yeah, I think markets change, don't they? It's like a smart move is to try and spot the change ahead of time and be moving in the right direction and not fighting the market, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
What
So
do you
you don't want to
feel?
be the blockbuster video in a Netflix world, do you?
Yeah, definitely. What do you feel, with ChatGPT? I'm really excited, but I'm also fearful for what it
Yes.
would mean, purely because there are organizations currently, due to losing some money, they are cutting their number of employees down to a smaller size, making people redundant and stuff.
Yeah.
Especially in the like newspaper writing and online content writing's world. And what they're saying is that, oh, one person can now do the job of four people, so the rest three of them can go. And obviously that means it's really efficient for that organization.
Hmm.
But if all the organizations become really efficient in the usage of AI as much as possible, and they obviously shed their weight in terms of employee size and stuff, what do you feel is likely to happen with the rest of the economy? Because so many people will be out of jobs. How would that actually? Because everyone would be really efficient in providing the service they do, and the maximum profits go to the chairman and obviously the shareholders. What happens?
Yeah, yeah. It's a really good question, isn't it? People get very het up, I suppose, about technology, don't they? And they always have done. I mean, ChatGPT is not really the notion of ChatGPT is not really a new thing.
Yeah.
Do you know where the word sabotage comes from? Have you heard that before?
No.
I think it's a French term, if I'm remembering it correctly. And Industrial Revolution era machines are starting to replace members of the workforce in factories, to the extent that huge quantities of people are finding themselves without jobs. And as a protest, the people that are working on the manufacturing lines are wearing shoes that are called sabot. It's like wooden shoes, and they throw these wooden shoes into the machines in order to destroy the machines, and the practice becomes known as sabotage, right? Yeah, it's the same, right? ChatGPT is coming along. ChatGPT will undoubtedly alter things, I think. But we talk about, there's spending a lot of time now talking about prompt engineers, right? And
Mhm.
the notion of being able to have your workforce being very, very skilled in how to work away with ChatGPT in order to be able to derive the maximum benefits from it. So I think that it's scary because technology is changing, but I think there's also a kind of I'm hoping that new generations of people coming into the workplace are much more flexible and much more show much more initiative in what they can do, and they can reallocate their resources and their capabilities in different ways in order to work with ChatGPT as well, in order to leverage its benefits. So I'm of no doubt that it will be a large driver of finance in the economy, but I think we have to kind of make sure our workforce is also leveraging that capability too. So yeah, and I think it's a if I'm remembering correctly, Zane, I think I've heard you say in the past yourself that AI is not the solution to every problem. So
Mm.
it's like, and I think that there's some truth in that as well, right? So it's easy to get nervous about ChatGPT, but
Basically what I would say is that before ChatGPT came along, there was nothing like it, right? It's a fundamental shift in AI, because before
yes.
that we had computer vision, we had simple sort of reinforcement learning. I think the last time something great happened was probably in sort of like, there are some good models, and DeepMind came up with something great with their AlphaGo, which is fine, but it was still not significant. Whereas this seems to be really significant in the sense that right now, I think one of the limits of ChatGPT is the memory. It seems to have no sense of what it's doing. If you
Mhm.
keep chatting to it, it forgets the very first sort of line, because all of that is summarized away.
All right.
And it's basically, it remembers the summary of things, not the exact details. So
Yep.
that it has a huge problem of dealing with that. And what I'm wondering is that suppose in the future it gets solved. If ChatGPT can come along like anytime, obviously it's possible that the memory issue doesn't get solved for another 5 years, but it's very much likely that the memory issue gets solved by the next sort of 5 months.
Mhm.
And if it is the case that it starts to sort of remember what it's doing, then it can do very complex tasks that require a very detailed sort of like, okay, here's what you need to do, and it requires probably 4 hours of human work, and it's a lot of copying and pasting and understanding and doing research on online and stuff, and then finding the answer. And ChatGPT, because of its memory thing, it can just do that really really
Mhm.
nicely. What I'm wondering is that now ChatGPT is here and it's going to get even better. What does the future look like? One thing I'm wondering is that I think humanity definitely needs bigger goals. Like we probably
Oh,
need
yeah.
harder challenges, like going into space, because we have ChatGPT and most of the work that we do, can be done very easily now. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I would love that. I think, you know, if you've spent a long time working in IT or engineering, it's easy to feel threatened by ChatGPT, right? Isn't it? Because
Yeah.
what would have taken a long time before now takes very little time at all. But I do quite like the idea, though, that we are being driven closer and closer to the innovation so that the heavy lifting is removed. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that is a good thing. I think a force for good, if it really genuinely drives us to getting to better solutions quicker, I think is good. What concerns me, I think, is and I think this is a hot debate on at the moment, and there is no right or wrong answer at the moment, but is what represents responsible use of generative AI, right? So it's I think that there are probably a lot of places and a lot of applications that you can use generative AI and it will never ever cause a problem. But I
Mhm.
think there will be places in society where its use will cause serious, unforeseen repercussions if things aren't mandated properly. So, and I think, that's not really a chat GPT problem. That's a people problem.
Yeah.
That's where is the right place to use this? Where is not the right place to use this, right? I think that's an important factor in it all. Yeah, I do sometimes look at it. The joke I was making last night is, in the financial services sector, there was a time when subprime mortgages were looked upon as being the best thing ever. It's like, this is a great investment model. Let's use this the whole time. And then I think we learned pretty quickly in 2008 that this is not a good idea. This is pretty irresponsible how this has all been set up. I do sometimes worry that irresponsible use of ChatGPT might be in a similar type of vein. For sure it has strong capabilities and benefits, but yeah, let's just think very carefully about where we use it and where we don't. Yeah.
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 It's yeah, I agree with that. The thing is that it's likely obviously to make people who are not developers, for example,
Yeah.
they'll use it to write code. They will try to say, well, I can write in, copy and paste, and it works, and why not, right? And they won't know what they're writing. So if they don't know how to write code, that's a big problem. But
Yeah.
they as so one thing is that as long as you know what the output should be and you can verify it, and verifying has to be done by a human, then it's great. The other thing is that it's likely to have a lot more people enter the industry, and not just for programming, enter even in design and stuff, because now they will use AI to do the work that they probably could not do before,
Mm.
or they wanted to do. But yeah, the one thing I felt is that ChatGPT is really a multiplier. If you're already 10x, ChatGPT will make you 100x.
Mm.
If you're already like, okay, 1x, then it'll make you 10x. But the person who is 10x before you can't beat that person if that person also uses ChatGPT.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yes. Yeah.
it's like it won't basically make the developers who have loads of experience redundant because of that. I don't see that's happening.
Mm.
But I think it's just the so many people will use it, and obviously companies take a very long time to become efficient anyway, right?
Mm.
It took ages to do digital transformation, and then it was basically lift and shift, and only recently they have sort of done a lot of the using cloud native tools. So, and not many organizations are still using AI. So ChatGPT is a very long way down. But
Yes.
once they do, I wonder whether it'll speed up for them, because just like I saw this meme during COVID times, which said that, oh, what who triggered or who drove the digital transformation in your company? And it said there was a box for CEO and it was unticked. There was a box for CTO and it was unticked. And there was a box for COVID and it was ticked. So COVID drove the digital transformation for many companies in 2021.
Yeah.
So that was quite interesting. And I wonder whether it's likely that companies will get caught on this, because if their competitors are using ChatGPT and they're getting ahead of them, then they will feel like, oh my God, we need to do it too. So that's the sort
Yeah.
of thing I'm wondering whether it's basically we have to be very careful. We have to allow it, but we even if we don't allow it, it will still be used. That's the other thing. So
Yeah.
it's a very
Oh,
interesting
yeah.
thing.
I don't think, it's like, you're not going to close Pandora's box here, are you? It's
Yeah.
like now that everyone's seen it's there, it's there. I think it's more to do with, yeah. I think responsible usage of it. It's interesting you said something there that I hit upon as a very old term that you don't hear bandied around very much these days. Have you ever heard of the term cargo cultism as it refers to writing code? You heard that one before?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the kind of notion of, I mean, I was told that it always orientated from the Pacific and stuff like that, and World War II, and the Americans landing on like distant islands like Iwo Jima and stuff like that, that there were native tribes that weren't in the technological era and would see like the Americans arrive there with the running out into the creating airstrips so that they could land planes on islands, and they would have the I think they called tom toms, are they,
Yeah.
the devices that they would hold in their hands to wave like that so that the plane would land, and apparently the Americans would come and give the local children chocolates and boxes of rations and so forth, so they were very positively looked upon. But then when it came to the end of the war and they left those places and they went back again, the local population didn't understand the design by which what brought the Americans there in the first place, and consequently they would go to abandoned runways and wave these devices to try and encourage a plane to land so that they could then get boxes of chocolates and food rations that the lovely people who landed there would give them, and I suppose that's they refer to that as a cargo cult, and I guess the design of that is very similar to, I've got a piece of code. I know that when I run this code, it does this thing, but I don't quite understand how it does that thing, but I know when I run that code, it does this thing. And then so you take that level of understanding and you use it and you use it and you use it in a whole load of other places, but you don't understand the why of that. And then there might be something that's suboptimal in there, or there might be something that's insecure in there, or there might be, some poor design choice somewhere. And in being exposed to that, you're weakening everything by your replicative model of duplication with it. So I think that's a danger
Yeah.
with ChatGPT. It's like if you get lots of people who come to the marketplace, they don't understand the background design, but they use ChatGPT and they use it for mimicry, but not for understanding. I
Hmm.
think that's a problem. I think one of our colleagues in the business, I'm pretty sure I've heard Sean in our organization, who's a big advocate of ChatGPT, is like, he said that a really good use of it is to have a code base created and then ask ChatGPT, what does the long-term maintenance of this code base look like? How would you recommend improving this if my data rose beyond a certain point? Is this suboptimal at that time? And so then you're not you're kind of being forced to engage with the understanding of it and to see how things change in iteration.
Hmm.
And I think in many ways that's a good use of that process. I was gonna chat about VBA macros. Like years ago in Excel. Do you remember, like, if you didn't know how to code in VBA, you'd go record macro and you'd do a whole load of stuff in the spreadsheet, and then you go stop, and then you'd look at the code that was generated for that macro, and you go, oh right, I understand that. That's a cell. That's this, and you maybe wouldn't use that record feature all the time in order to build automation in Excel, but you'd build it in order to understand how the VBA scripting would work, right? It's
Yeah.
like,
You
or at least
can.
I've seen a lot of people do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can use ChatGPT to write VBA.
Yes. Thus removing the requirement for the macro.
uh, people
Yeah.
people are doing it. Funnily, people are actually doing, because Excel is like something like that's never likely to go away.
Yes.
Never gonna go away.
It's more ingrained than ChatGPT is. It's like,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's Excel is likely that, and yeah, so people are using ChatGPT with Excel to write the formulas to do things. And Excel is great. It's just that it has a limit of the how much data you can use on Excel.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that's the otherwise, there's so many people who are so well versed with Excel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good tool. I mean,
It's,
yeah,
I
I
think,
can see why people hate it, but yeah,
I think that's equally true, isn't it? I mean, like, when Excel is used well, I mean, it's hard to beat, right?
yeah,
And it's it's the technology that's everywhere, right?
yeah,
But I've spent a large part of my career trying to correct people who have thought it was a good idea to create a database in Excel, which is not a great plan. I'm going to tell you, it's like there are lots of things that make that not a good idea.
yeah,
But I've also equally seen consultants in the space who are Excel experts do things with Excel that are very impressive indeed. But the trick is, knowing what to do and what not to do, isn't it?
yeah,
That's just
exactly.
life in general, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. What is one thing that you advocate or you would like to advocate, something that's not happening in technology or not happening often that should happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, you'd be posing that question thinking about the very innovative things that I could say here. But as an old school engineer, I think what's common through my experience of my career really is that data quality is data quality was rubbish 20 years ago. Data quality is quite often rubbish today, right?
Mm,
And it's like, and there are very key drivers for that happening. I cannot tell you the number of systems that I've worked with over time where we've put in so much effort into cleaning up data sources so that they become good and usable to
mm,
derive benefit, insight, various data science services, modeling, predictions, etc., etc. But the whole why wasn't the data in perfect quality from the get-go? That's the question you always end up asking yourself, right? How could I not capture the data as perfect at its point of inception when it first became aware? And that's like a problem that doesn't get as much insight, I don't think, as it should do.
Give an
AI,
example. Give an
I
example
think
of
it's
what. Yeah.
GUI design
Okay.
is a big problem, right? I think that's where a lot of it hails from. So, like, if you think about inputs of data to processes as they exist today are quite often web forms or their mobile app forms in a mobile app, or and they're designed by businesses when a new customer comes on board, for example,
Mm,
and for some reason or other the form hasn't accounted for something about an individual, and thus the form has kind of been hacked and the data quality altered so that you can get the details for that individual drawn into play, and in doing so the data downstream has become bad as a result. So I think it's something that's quite often overlooked, and I think if you hold if businesses hold themselves really hard to account on whether good GUI development looks good at the point of capture for data, you'd save so much of a headache downstream.
yeah.
You'd like so much effort that sits all the way through the process and the pipeline.
Yeah. Well,
But
the GUI design is based on the UX or UI design, right?
yeah,
And that is designed on whatever schema they need to think about to capture. And they probably already have a database that they have already created, and they're saying, "Oh, here's a schema. Could you go and design the UI on top of that?"
mm,
And that's it. Your job is done.
yeah,
So it basically it's a circle thing, right? This database decides the schema. So someone was sitting there deciding the schema, gives it to the front end dev. The front end dev basically puts some buttons. The UI is designed, and then the form is there, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like a full cycle of being aware of what data we need to capture, what are the different scenarios that can happen. So I agree, there's so many things that can go wrong in just data
yes.
capture.
But an old colleague of mine years ago had an article about the rules that are allowed for the capture of people's names, and I wish I'd need to hunt it out and find it, but I've tried a couple of times but not managed to track it down. So it must have been quite a niche article, but but it said things like, so everybody that you're going to interact with that's going to be a customer of yours is going to have a forename and surname, right? No. It's like everyone's going to have, well, at least a surname, or at least one name, a surname or a forename. Not so much. It's
Yeah,
like, and it's like, and I mean, these are things that can be problematic potentially in edge case scenarios, but then there's even more holistic things. It's like, is every customer of your business in the UK going to have a name that can be written with the Roman alphabet, right? It's like
yeah, you need
no,
the
it's like
yeah.
yeah. So I mean, it's like the reason why this article I was mentioning was so funny is because it set aside all these rules that we kind of have as maybe a bias in society, and we think about all these things as biases. Like, oh God, another brilliant one. Everybody has a title, a salutation. Is it Mr. or Mrs. or Miss, or some kind of, like, I've been in some reverend, or like I have a religious title that's applied to my name, or but some people have no titles at all. Some people have no desire for titles. Obviously, so you can't, you can't mandate a fixed set of rules on this kind of criteria and then expect the system that you've got downstream to be accurate. It's
Mm.
like, and the article was funny because it had all of these biases written down, and then at the end it was kind of like none of them apply, none of them are accurate, and the real truth is, when somebody comes to you and says, "This is me, this is my details," that's what you've got to use. It's like, it's like, and you've got to have a system that's flexible enough to account for what the individual wants as their designation.
Yeah, that's
So
yeah, that's
it's
quite interesting. Even in just Europe, like for example, in the UK we have surname, right? In Europe there is, I think it's more like first name, last name, right? Or family name. And then in Spain they have like a family name, that's the you have a family name from your dad's side and your mother's side, right? So each culture is different.
Yes.
And there's no way you're going to have a first name, last name, and someone's going to, like, and surname is not a family name. Sometimes it's just not.
Yeah.
So there's just so many different edge
Yeah.
cases. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the I mean it's a textbook example of bias, isn't it? So it's like it's yeah, the best game is to have the system that you're building flexible enough to account for pretty much all circumstances.
Yeah, and then you have, the son of Elon Musk, which is like a name which is X something dash, how do you even pronounce that?
Oh yeah. Oh, the one. What's the classic joke about the? Have you seen the cartoon with the wee Billy tables? Have you seen that? So it's like with the parent who's decided to name their child as like name semicolon select star from user table in order to try and exploit SQL injection attacks. It's like,
Yeah.
and a school teacher, scolding the parents for being irresponsible in their naming, and then the parents scolding the school for allowing SQL injection attacks. It's because they're it's like, yeah, it's taking the whole thing to quite an extreme, but yeah, it's
Yeah, that's
getting the data quality. I think like I guess the whole thing I mean is spending a good deal of time to figure out how you get the best data quality at source and how you enable people to provide that without encroaching on them and irritating them. I think is
yeah,
is the
making them feel limited. That,
yeah.
oh, you know what, I can't put in my full name because there are not enough characters allowed, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I agree with that. I think there should be, in some forms I've seen, there should be like what you would like to be known as, like, and then
Yeah.
you put the name in, or if you want to put a legal name, but then you also put a known as, and then you can put it could be any name that you would prefer. So then
Yes.
people know what to call you, even though your name's going to be probably really long.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's difficult. Yeah. It's like I mean some people in legitimate cases have more than one name as well, right? Or names that they use differently for different contexts.
Yeah.
So yeah, my wife is from Taiwan, and she has a Chinese name and an English name, and she intentionally does that. She because she wants people to find it easier to pronounce her name in English by choosing an English name that sounds phonetically close to her Chinese name, but not the same. So it's like, and that's quite a generous gesture of her, I think, to do that. But I think that's quite a commonplace practice, yeah, to kind of like make things easier for the audience you're talking to, which I think is admirable, really. But yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah. Well, this brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you, Andrew. Is there something you would like to promote?
Oh yes, yeah. I'd like to. I'd like to promote Optima Partners, the organisation that I work for. So yeah, we're doing a lot of work with blue chip organisations at the moment in the engineering space where I come from, in the data science space as well, in health data science. We're working with in pharmaceutical businesses too, and in business consultancy too. So we're doing a lot of work in business change process, marketing transformation processes, those type of things as well. So yeah, it's we're a growing team at the moment, all very enthusiastic to engage in business problems and fix them in the most optimal ways. Just whatever the technology or the process or the people configuration may be. It's like that's how we're what makes us happy, what drives us. So yeah.
Cool, nice. Yeah, thank you. So I'll put the links in the description. So yeah, everyone can basically click on that and reach out to you. Thank you for being on this show.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It was good. Thank you.